how can this thermal imaging help property owners and property managers save money on repairs and energy costs like in an apartment building?
So as John talked about earlier with air leakage and condensation, things like that, a few things that are either common sense or maybe not be, depending on your level of construction knowledge. But building code is moving more and more towards an airtight building envelope, right? And we know that if you are paying and using energy to condition air, whether that is to heat it up or cool it down, and that is leaking out of the building envelope somewhere, you're wasting money, right?
So
now,
true.
on certain levels, it's impossible to avoid. That's why building code discusses energy efficiency and things like U factors and R factors. With these are talking about the thermal resistance to temperature change. On other manners, when we talk about wet materials, unfortunately, when insulating materials get wet, they lose their insulating value. That what is supposed to be something that resists that thermal change is now actually turning into a conductor of that change. So you're kind of bridging that gap when these wet materials are getting wet. You're kind of bridging that gap between maybe it's hot outside and it's cooler inside during the summer. Now you've got this wet insulation sitting in between those two, and next thing you know, your energy bills are going up a little bit here, a little bit there, and it also has other effects on the structure from rust and things like that. So really, it's just a matter of awareness, and that's the beautiful part about visualizing thermal energy is we're seeing where it's going. We're seeing where it's trapped. So just by having that awareness and then partnering with roofing professionals or HVAC professionals or even electricians for that matter, depending on what system you're working on, they're going to be able to lay out some options to get you to a more energy efficient standpoint.
Wow. Man, I would be scared to see a thermal scan of my house. It's just all the heat escaping.
Yeah, most of the time you're going to see it around doors and windows, things like that in the houses, which is pretty common for everybody because that's where there's a change in building composition. But
for sure.
Especially in the older houses, you see some pretty eye-opening pictures, if you will.
I bet. So quick curveball question. So maybe a home or property owner is listening to this right now and they're thinking, man, I don't think I need a new roof, but I would love to get a thermal scan of my house to see how I can make it more efficient, energy efficient. Is that something that is an option for home or building owners?
I think that the use case for that is definitely possible, especially with an attic space or the availability to add that barrier between conditioned space and non-conditioned space. Generally speaking, in commercial applications, the only way to add additional insulation is to put it between the structural deck and the waterproofing membrane,
right?
Which would consist of a roof replacement.
Yep.
For a facility that has an attic type of space that, like I said, is that barrier between outside and inside, there's definitely the ability to add insulation and kind of correct some of those voids without interrupting the roof.
Okay.
One warning sign for those situations as well for people who live in areas where there is snowfall. After about a day after a lighter snowfall, if you're buried in inches, it's not going to be as apparent. But let's say you get 1.5 inches out there, look up at the roof. If you start seeing telegraphing lines coming through the snow because the snow's melting in those patterns, that's a good sign that you have some room to improve. We'll say there's different scenarios that can present themselves, but that's a good indicator like, hey, maybe I should get a thermal scan completed just to understand what's going on, because realistically, if everything is in a perfect world scenario, all that snow should be melting at the same rate because it's all one consistent temperature in there. So if you're seeing hot spots of the snow melting, maybe cause to give somebody a call and come out with an infrared camera.
Interesting. Okay. So this seems pretty straightforward to me, but how does using a drone for inspections make someone climbing on the roof safer? You know, it's preventing them from getting on the roof. How is that safer?
I think that, Ryan alluded to earlier on about, the process of flying the drone. You're on the ground in most cases and following some regulations, and being on the ground is definitely safer than being at height. But, besides the obvious, there's definitely situations where most commercial roofs these days, you're going to have skylights, you're going to have other types of openings that, are hard to navigate in the daytime, let alone at night, walking around, paying attention to a camera, distracted. And when you're on a roof that may have had prolonged leak occurrences, maybe the structural component of that roof is deteriorated, and you could be walking across a roof and not notice there may be a spongy area that, could lead to you falling through the roof. So there's just a little bit of extra concern that, when you're getting up on a building, let alone in the dark. And most of the time, the people that we've seen around in our area, they're going out and performing these inspections by themselves.
Interesting.
Being by yourself on a roof in the dark at, health problems, some other emergency kicks into, how are you getting somebody to assist you or help you, even just in a general health emergency? So it's just it's just an all around safer way to achieve what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with some of these huge apartment buildings. I mean, that's just scary also. Being up there, I'd be scared. And so much safer. I think that's great. If your roof needs answers, subscribe now to the Ask a Roofer podcast. We've got your questions covered, one episode at a time. Go to AskARoofer.com to submit your questions and learn more. Stay tuned and keep those questions coming.